My name is Philippe Chauffard. I'm part of Accenture Cloud First, and I lead our infrastructure engineering practice globally.
Hi, I'm Teresa Tung. I'm our Cloud First Chief Technologist, where I'm looking at the future of cloud, of which Edge and the Cloud Continuum is a critical part.
Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to our session on edge computing. Edge computing is a new capability that extends computing to the edge of the network, where it's closest to users and devices, and most critically, as close as possible to data sources. But how do you leverage edge to help you optimize those data sources in a world where hybrid and multi-cloud becomes the new normal? In this session, you will learn how hybrid cloud and edge truly complement each other and augment each other in the new cloud continuum by enabling new analytics, new applications to be distributed all the way to the edge, and in turn generate more data that feeds back into the cloud to optimize new applications and experiences. Now let's talk about the cloud continuum. Innovation used to be exclusively or mostly in the public cloud. Now, if you think about the way enterprises have actually sourced, engineered, implemented their infrastructure and their application landscape, it used to be across multiple, silos, hybrid, private, public. But it was usually in a fairly disjointed, separated way, which did not enable actually the capability to automate and optimize across those capabilities. Now we're actually redefining a new term for cloud, what we call the cloud continuum, that truly extends the boundaries across, the traditional centralized cloud to private colo data centers environments and all the way to the edge. And really leverage the underlying network connectivity, in a very software-defined way to provide a truly continuum spectrum of cloud capabilities, all the way from centralized components to the edge. And that's where the true power of the cloud continuum becomes a reality. Now, in addition, this is not just about technology, it's about all the extended capabilities across the operating model, the talent as well, that also need to really cover that new continuum and extend all the way to the edge. Now, maybe let me turn over to Teresa to talk a bit more about what edge is.
Well, let me start with what edge is not, right? So edge is not competitive with the cloud. As Philippe just mentioned, it's part of a continuum where the compute can happen anywhere. Edge is also not just 5G. 5G is a critical enabler that will make edge much better, much more reliable, more real time. But there will be many applications of edge without 5G. Edge is also not just Internet of Things or IoT. IoT allows us to sense and get data from the edge, but the ability to analyze and to act is also really critical in realizing edge value. And edge is not just on-premise. Edge really has to work together with the network and with the cloud, both on-prem and public. So what is edge? Edge is really a new topology, right? It's a new hub and spoke model where you still have a lot of the centralized, low-price commodity on-demand compute in the cloud. And then you have all the edge environments, right? Where you might have the richest source of data, where resources may be more limited. You might have the network, which is also offering capabilities for compute. And these channel in a hub and spoke model from the edge to the cloud. So it's really complementary to cloud. And it's a really continuum where the cloud is now extended onto your customer premise and on site with many stops along the way. So I'm going to talk about 4 laws for edge scenarios. You should think about these when you're thinking about where do I apply edge? The first law is around the laws of physics. It's literally the speed of light. And this is really going to impact how quickly, how reliable you could get data, how much data you could get, the bandwidth. And so if you have a use case, let's say smart signage, that sign and that ad has to happen in the moment. They have to detect this is Teresa and to get the right ad and to serve it back to. And so that ability to act quickly with rich data, that happens with the edge. The second law we call laws of economics. It's literally money, right? So sometimes it doesn't make sense to transmit data all the way from the edge to the cloud or the cloud to the edge. So you can think about it like if you were on an offshore rig or if you were on a ship and the cost to transmit data via satellite, it's expensive. It's better to keep that high fidelity data at the edge and send back just what you need. The law of regulation, literally the laws of the land, right? So there's privacy, there's data sovereignty. You don't want to have your private patient data, going off-site. You really need to control that. That's where edge might help. And then finally, laws of Murphy. This is where if anything can go wrong, it might. And so for things that require automation, robotics, just things that have to work point of sale, this is where edge is really the right solution.
Yeah, and now this is the link back to the hybrid architectures and the hybrid cloud, right? Because if you look at those four laws, right? I mean, clearly, the traditional, cloud approach of, going back to the central or centralized, big cloud is just not going to work. You are going to need those dedicated, infrastructures that sit at the edge, right? Whether it's about the laws of physics, because you're going to need that, be able to, get this reactivity, right? That speed of light limit. Think back about the examples that Teresa was just talking about, whether it's on the ship or the point of sale. Again, you're going to need, to be able to have an architecture and an infrastructure that will be able to leverage that computing that sits in the ship or in the shop, at the dedicated environment, right? So this is why, the hybrid architectures are going to be required to be able to not only implement those, use case for edge and those scenarios for edge, but then more importantly, also be able to scale, right? Because you can implement, some proof of concepts or, some very early trials. But if you want to be able to truly scale those kind of scenarios, you're going to need underneath a very solid hybrid foundation that's going to allow you to do that, right? So again, this is where truly hybrid and edge work together. One provides the foundation to enable those scenarios, and then in turn, right, the edge capabilities are going to provide a lot of additional data that can then be used to drive further automation, further optimization of the cloud and the underlying infrastructure itself. So it's a very virtuous circle, between those two, really critical capabilities. Now, let me maybe start by using one example. It's, in the automotive industry, an automotive manufacturer, right? And that's one case that actually was really started, during the crisis and the pandemic. It was very interesting because it was about I would say the next wave and the next implementation of the cloud strategy for that, for that enterprise. They had already implemented, two rounds. First, an infrastructure consolidation and rationalization. Then we had, worked very closely with them for, phase two. That was really an implementation of, further consolidation and a first, private cloud implementation. Now, it was a time for them to actually go to the next step. And as you can imagine, right, the automotive industry was very badly hit during the COVID-19 crisis, right? This was really an industry that was in survival mode, right? So we needed to be able to not only provide them with a compelling case, but also help them, build for the future and create the capabilities that were going to enable them not only to navigate that storm that they were already deep in, but also paved the foundation for the future, right? For a future where resilience and change were going to become the new normal. So we actually worked hand in hand with them to define a hybrid multi-cloud environment and architecture that was leveraging not only a dedicated private cloud, but also leveraging the Google Cloud. And the intent was to be able to address many of those capabilities, right? Because they had some regulatory constraints, some security specific requirements that were critical for them. And therefore, having that dedicated hybrid infrastructure was very important, right? And they had some very strong views, and we worked hand in hand with them to define that architecture. But at the same time, they wanted to be able to leverage the innovation, the scale, the elasticity, and a lot of those new capabilities around data and data analytics. And therefore, being able to leverage the big cloud in a way was very critical. So that's why they needed that hybrid approach. Now, what was very differentiated here is that we worked with them in order to be able to actually define a program that enabled them to build that new hybrid infrastructure, engineer it, deploy it, operate it in a new way. All of that by bringing them some significant incremental savings on top of what they had already done with their two previous phases of infrastructure consolidation. And at the same time, do all of that at zero cost, right? It was a self-funding transformation that enabled, the creation of that new infrastructure. As well as obviously starting the migration and the modernization on top of that infrastructure. But what was really very important as well, as I talked about paving the way and the foundation for the future. That new infrastructure, which was for the corporate IT as a step one, then provided the foundation for their new evolution around all the future edge capabilities. Now, maybe let me turn over back to Teresa to talk about an edge scenario that is very linked to that one.
Thanks, Philippe. So once we've rolled out that cloud continuum with hybrid extending to the edge, this allows an automotive manufacturer to reimagine, let's say, their production lines. Within that production line, we can have edge analytics with a camera that monitors the defects or not, the quality, right, as things come down that line. And right in that moment, using that high fidelity video that doesn't make sense to transmit all the way to the cloud, but uses an analytics algorithm that is developed in the cloud. But that analytics algorithm is now operating right at the edge, on the line, in real time, making quality decisions. And then if something were to go wrong, it controls, let's say, a robotic arm to really fix just the parts that can be fixed, or identify things that can be fixed and make the adjustment. Right? So that happens with that new topology at the edge. Another case, by having, again, this new continuum, it could power innovation towards creating a better product, right? So maybe rethinking the experience of the driver now that we have more self-driving cars. What's that new experience going to look like for me if I'm not driving most of the time, but I still need to be aware to be safe and to be alert? And so really cloud, it accelerates the edge. And edge is enabling new experiences. And this is enabled by the continuum in two ways. It's really that topology that allows this sense, analyze, act loop to happen right in the moment. So in the production line, in the car, it can keep things working and to really act based off of context. It is a larger loop that connects the edge to the cloud via hybrid, right? That allows that same experience to be fed back using a rich source of data for a company like the manufacturer to be able to make better experiences, to better customize, make safer production, and push that out to the edge. So it's really a virtuous cycle where the new continuum is both a new topology and a new continuous innovation engine.
We're only scratching the surface, right? If you look at, industry data points, Accenture research, we see a world and industry where we're moving to multi-cloud and hybrid cloud, right? So the good news is that many enterprises, actually 3/4 of enterprises, have already embarked on such a journey and are therefore laying the foundation for such a hybrid infrastructure and such a hybrid cloud. And therefore will be able, when the time is right for them, to extend across the cloud continuum all the way to the edge, based on the specific scenarios and use cases that they will need for their industry, right? But again, this is only scratching the surface. This is only the beginning of a great journey, which I'm convinced will accelerate very, very rapidly as the value of those new scenarios and new capabilities will really, I think, explode and go well beyond what we can imagine today. So we're here to help. We would love to be able to get that discussion to the next level. We have a lot more content and thought leadership to share with you. So please reach out to us and we'll be delighted to take that discussion further. Thank you very much.